Salvete omnes. This is Gai Iuli Caesaris Commentarii de Bello Gallico Liber Primus, Chapter 44, Part 1. And Caesar writes, Ariovistus ad postulata Caesaris pauca respondit, de suis virtutibus multa praedicavit. So we have Ariovistus, the German king, Rex Germanus, king of the Suebi. So Rex Sueborum. He's the nominative singular masculine subject. Here we have ad, preposition to or towards in reference to, plus the accusative motion ad postulata. So in reference to the postulata, postulatum is a demand. You can see it's the noun form from the verb postulo, postulare. This is the accusative plural neuter. To the demands, the genitive singular masculine possession of Caesar, pauca respondit. Pauca is the accusative plural neuter of pauci ia. Here it's like an accusative, direct object, but it's almost being used adverbially, and that's probably how we should best parse it, as an adverbial accusative. It's pretty much modifying the verb respondit, as in Ariovistus respondit pauca. Literally, it's he replied a few things in reference to the demands of Caesar, but it's almost like he replied a little bit to the demands of Caesar. De suis virtutibus multa, in contrast to multa praedicavit. So, but concerning suis virtutibus, remember you should be able to circle the su part and draw an arrow to the subject of praedicavit, which is also Ariovistus. So su and then the is part modifies virtutibus. So virtus, virtutis, feminine. Manliness, you can see the root of this is vir, and this is the ablative plural feminine vir virtutis, manliness. Courage, valor. It's whatever makes a vir, a vir. And then suis, suisaum, and it's going to be ablative plural feminine to agree with it. And it's ablative because of the preposition de. The multa, like the pauca, accusative plural neuter, is the direct object, but also the adverbial accusative of praedicavit, to speak first about or put yourself first in your telling, to boast. So instead of replying a lot to the demands of Caesar, he replied pauca a little bit to the demands of Caesar, but he boasted multa, much, about his own valor, his own manliness, his own virtues. And this is what he boasted. This is what he said, a rather long, lengthy, indirect statement. He praedicavit multa. And remember the rest of this in this oratio obliqua, this big indirect statement, this big oblique speech. The subject of the indirect statement will be in the accusative case. The verb will be an infinitive, and the infinitive will get its tense based upon its relationship to the main verb, and the main verb is praedicavit. So all of these actions, all of these infinitives, are in reference to praedicavit, the main verb that introduced the indirect statement. He boasted. So it's a past tense. Sometimes some things may be put into a present tense to make them more vivid, but for the most part we are going to follow sequence of tenses. Keep in mind that any subordinate clauses are going to be in the subjunctive. And the only reason really they're in the subjunctive is because they're a subordinate clause in the indirect statement. So transi serenum sese, non sua sponte, sed rogatum et arcessitum a Gallis. Non sine magnisque primiis domum propinquosque reliquisse. Of course, obviously. Transise, the perfect active infinitive of transeo, to go across. It takes accusative objects, so renum, that to have crossed the Rhine. And remember, this infinitive inside this oratio obliqua acts like a finite verb with an accusative subject. Se is just the emphatic form of say. Here it's the accusative singular masculine, and it's modifying ario vistus. It's referring back to the subject of the verb which introduced the indirect statement, the praedicavit. He boasted that he himself, yes, it was he, very emphatic. Transisse, so it's a perfect infinitive, which means that it happened prior to the main verb, the verb which introduces the indirect statement. Before he boasted all this stuff to Caesar, he had already, transisse, crossed the Rhine. That he had crossed the Rhine. Non sua sponte, not of sua, the reflexive, refers to sese, refers to aria vistus, not of his own accord. Of course not. This is an ablative. Not by means of his own accord. Sed rogatum, which agrees with sese, ario vistus, ario vistum, et arcesitum. He was rogatum, rogo rogare, asked, having been asked, and arcesso, arcesere, to summon, having been summoned, a Gallis, by the Gauls. Ab plus the ablative, gallusaum. These are arcesitum and rogatum, accusative singular masculine, because they have to agree with sese, the accusative singular masculine subject here, subject accusative of the indirect statement. Non, sine takes the ablative. Magna agrees with spe, spei, feminine hope. And magnus aum, magna, ablative singular feminine, agrees with it. Not without great hope. Magnisque, and with great primiis, not without great hope, and closely linked with spe are great primium e neuter. Primiis are prizes. Domum, this is the accusative of domus us feminine. Remember, it's a slightly irregular noun. Propinquosque, from propinquus something which is prope, close by, nearby. As a noun, it refers to those that are closer next to you, like in a kin or blood sense, like on a family tree. So it means relatives or relations. Oh, how sad. He had relinqua, relinquere, reliqui, relictus. Left behind. He had left behind, relinquo. It's a perfect infinitive, like transisse. He had already done this thing. He had left behind. His domum. Oh no. Accusative direct object. His home. And also, the que closely links propinquos with domum. And his relations, his relatives. Oh no, he misses his cousins. Just as magnis primiis with the que is closely linked to magna spe. Not without great hope and great rewards had he left his home and relations. This is a bit of a rhetorical device, hendiades. We could, which means it's Greek 1 through 2, hen dia dis, 1 through 2, where you say one thing, but you use two things to say it. What he really means is not without the hope of great rewards. But instead of using a genitive here, he says not without great hope and great rewards. So instead of saying the one unit, great hope of rewards, he splits them into two different units. Hen, dia, dus. We call that hendiades. Sedes habere in Gallia ab ipsis concessas, obsides ipsorum voluntate datos. Oh man, this guy's good. Sedes. This is from sedis, sedis, which is a seat or a home or a house. It comes from the noun sedeo. So this is the accusative, and it's going to be plural. And here it's going to be the direct object of habere. Se, which refers to aria vistus, is still going to be the subject of this infinitive here, habere. Notice the shift in tense, where before we had perfect tense, transisse and reliquisse, where he had already done these things, where now the shift in present tense shows contemporaneous action, where he currently, at the same time that he was boasting all this stuff to Caesar, he owned, he possessed sedes, we could say settlements, possessions, holdings, real estate. He had holdings, possessions, real estate, settlements, in plus the ablative of location, Gallia, in Gaul. Ab ipsis, ab plus the ablative, and then the ablative of ipse, ipsa, ipsum, himself, itself, and it's going to be from the Gauls, Gallis, themselves, so add a self, himself, herself, itself. Concessas, from concedo, concedere, concessi, concessus. Concessas, that agrees with sedes, so accusative, plural, and feminine. So the sedes, which he currently owns, possesses, has, in Gallia, they were concedo, they were yielded, had already been yielded. As a perfect passive participle, it shows an action which happened prior to the verb, the main verb, and the main verb here is habere. So before Ariovistus, currently, when he boasted to Caesar, was in possession of these settlements, these sedes, they had already been concessas, from concedo, yielded ab ipsis, and this refers to the Gallis, like it is arcesitum a Gallis, by they themselves, by the very people, the people of Gallia, yielded, given over, handed over by the very people themselves. He owned settlements in Gallia, handed over, yielded by the people themselves, the Gauls themselves. Obsides, obsidus, masculine, accusative, plural, masculine, and then datos will go with it the same way that concessas goes with sedes. Ipsorum, genitive, plural, masculine, of themselves, of the Gauls themselves. It's like sending in for gallorum. Voluntate, voluntas, voluntatis, feminine, by the ablative, by their free will, of their own free will. Datos, handed over by their own free will. Hostages, handed over by their own free will. Stipendium capere iure belli, quod victores victis imponere consuerent. That he stipendium capere, that he, the stipendium, stipendi neuter, you can see stipend in there. Here this is a tax or a tribute. This is a sort of tribute that is being imposed after Ariovistus came over the Rhine and conquered the Gauls. He beat the Gauls in battle. He then imposed a tribute upon them. And he said that he is capere currently, like habere is currently, it's contemporaneous to the main verb, praedicavit, that he was capere, capio, capere, capi, captus, taking a stipendium, a tribute, just as he was currently in possession of settlements. And was currently taking this tribute, iure belli, by jus juris neuter, by the law, by the right of bellum e neuter, of war, genitive, by the law of war, by the right of war. What is that right? Well, that right, or that quote, refers to the stipendium, which the victores victis imponere consuerent, which the victores, you can see the victor, the agency suffix, victores and victis, it comes from the same verb. It's vinco, vincere, vici, victus. Now, we take the fourth principal part, victus, chop off the us, and we get the stem vict, add the or, and you get the winner, the winner. And this is the nominative plural masculine. It's nominative because it's a subordinate clause inside the indirect statement. So this verb is going to be a finite verb, not an infinitive. Notice it has an ending. It'll be subjunctive, which indicates to you that this is a subordinate clause inside the indirect statement. It's a relative clause with its antecedent of quod being stipendium, attribute which the winners, nominatives are the subject of finite verbs, whereas accusatives are the subjects of infinite infinitives. So consuerent, they have been accustomed, or they are accustomed, to imponere, to impose. What are they accustomed to do? To imponere. Impono, imponere, to impono, to place upon. The dative victis. So the victores are the winners. The victis, this comes from the fourth principal part of the verb winco as well, only it's the passive form. So not the active winners, but the ones who have been won against. The winning happened against them. We could also say the losers, the conquerors, the conquered, the winners, the losers, which the winners are accustomed to impose upon the conquered, which the conquerors upon the conquered are accustomed to impose. And that's why he's taking a tribute. Currently, right now, in the process, present active infinitive shows a contemporaneous action. He's doing so because of, by means of the law of war, the right of warfare. I beat them in warfare, therefore they pay me money, they are my slaves. They do what I want. Non sese Gallis, sed Gallos sibi bellum intulisse. So nice antithesis here. It's like victores victis, put right next to each other like that. Non, not sese, he himself, aria vistus. We're repeating the subject just in case you got lost. So the accusative subject of the indirect statement. Gallis is going to be dative, plural masculine. Said, but gallos, notice that it corresponds with gallis. Now gallos is accusative, going to be the subject of the same verb. So sese, this accusative, is the subject of the upcoming verb. Then the said informs us that we have now switched, and then gallos will be the subject of the upcoming verb. And now these are two different clauses, and both use the same verb. He had not intulisse, inferro, inferre, intuli, elatus. He had not inflicted bellum, direct object warfare, upon the dative gallis. Oh no, of course not. Of course he had not. He had, remember, been asked and invited by the Gauls. Then, of course, they handed themselves over as prisoners willingly. They were willing slaves, and they said, "Here, take all of our things. We don't want them anymore." And yes, of course, this is exactly what is accustomed to happen. The winners impose this stuff on the losers. Yes, of course. Sounds like the Athenians. The strong do what they want. The weak suffer whatever happens to them. The weak suffer what they must. Which is just terrible. So he had not inflicted war upon the Gauls, but the Gauls had inflicted war upon Sibi himself. Notice the antithesis. Gallis, Gallo, sese, Sibi. He's the subject. He did not do this to the Gauls. Now the Gauls are the subject, but they did do this to Sibi him. Oh, terrible. I wonder if he's a liar. Omnes Galliae civitates ad se oppugnandum venisse, ac contra se castra habuisse. So omnes Galliae civitates. So omnis omne, all every, probably going to be the accusative, because why would you see a nominative around here? Unless it's a subordinate clause like in here. Galliae, so of Gaul, genitive, singular, and civitates, civitas, civitatis, feminine, a state. All the states of Gaul, genitive, out of Gaul, belonging to Gaul, all of Gaul's states. Ad se, ad plus the accusative, se to himself, Ariovistus, oppugnandum. Notice it's a gnarly nd thingy. We have oppugno, oppugnare, oppugnavi, oppugnatus. There's the stem pugna, and then we have the nd stem, and then we have this form here. This is not going to be a passive periphrastic because there's no form of sum around with which it can agree to modify it to tell you it's a passive periphrastic. Then you're going to say usually it's implied anyway, and I'm going to say ha ha ha, of course. So this is actually a gerundive because it's agreeing like an adjective with say, the pronoun. To himself, and ad plus the accusative gerund or gerundive in this case, shows purpose. For the attacking, and its object is say, of him. They agree. The gerundive is like an adjective and agrees with its object in gender, number, and case. In order to attack him, for the attacking of him. All the states of Gaul for the attacking of him, in order to attack him. Venisse, they, venia, venire, veni, ventus, perfect active infinitive. They had come together. So all the states of Gaul had come together, they had shown up in order to attack him. Oh no. And also, don't forget, contra se, contra, takes the accusative, against himself, Ariovistus, accusative. Casra, a camp, habuisse. They had, habuisse, held a camp. We could just say they had encamped. So all the states of Gaul had shown up in order to attack him, and they encamped against him. The nerve of these people. Eas omnes copias, a se uno proelio pulsas, ac superatas esse. Yeah, pretty proud of that, aren't we? Eos, accusative plural feminine from is, ea, id, this thing, that thing. Omnes from omnis, omne, all, every, accusative plural feminine, and agreeing with copias from copiae aurum feminine plural, probably going to be forces or troops. All of these forces, meaning the ones that we just talked about belonging to the Gauls. The accusative, probably the direct object, or subject accusative of the indirect statement. Ab plus the ablative se by he himself, Ariovisto, referring to Ariovistus. Uno goes with proelio, uno sa one, and proelio from proelium e neuter, battle. In a single battle, ablative of means, by means of a single battle. In English, we would probably say in a single battle, like its location, but the Romans prefer to think of it like it was means. And pulsas, from pello, pellere, pulsi, pulsus. Puli, pulsus. So pulsas, accusative plural feminine, and it's going with copias. The esse also goes with pulsas, but because pulsas and superatus are so closely linked with the souped-up conjunction ac, then one esse serves well enough for both of them, instead of pulsas esse ac superatus esse. So pulsas ac superatas esse works just fine. Superatus from supero, superare, superavi, superatus, and then the esse tells you that these are both perfect perfect passive infinitives. So it shows that the forces had been beaten and had been defeated, overcome by he himself, Ariovistus, by means of a single battle, in one battle. They all showed up to defeat me. They all showed up to attack me. They encamped against me. And all of these forces routed and defeated by he himself, by me, in a single battle. Si iterum experire velint, se iterum paratum esse decatare. If si iterum, again, experire velint, experior, which means to try it out, to test it, to have the experience. Velint, third person plural, present active subjunctive. If they should want, and it's probably present because of the protasis of the conditional C, and where you probably would expect an imperfect subjunctive because of the we're cast in secondary sequence. We're probably doing a future more vivid. In fact, we are doing a future more vivid or future most vivid because it is happening now. If they should want to do this right now in the present, making this very vivid, that if they want to do this right now, if they want to try it out again, if they want to fight again, he himself, Ariovistus, again, paratum esse, was paratum. Notice it's accusative to agree with se. Esse was prepared to decatare, to fight it out, to fight it to a conclusion. You guys want to try again? Happy to oblige. Si pace uti velint, iniquum esse de stipendio recusare, quod sua voluntate ad id tempus pependerent. So see if pace uti velint, if pax pacis feminine, peace, ablative singular feminine, and it's the ablative object of uti, which is utor uti ususum, to use, velint, third person plural, present active subjunctive of volo, velle, volui, if they should want, it's coordinate with velint. If they again want to try it right now, then he was right now prepared to fight it out again. If they should want to enjoy peace, make use of peace, if they want to uti, this is a present infinitive because it's a deponent verb, looks passive, translate as active, to have peace, make use of peace. Remember, utor always takes an ablative of means as its direct object, as it's an intransitive verb, because it means to use, to make use of, an ablative of means, to make use of a thing in the ablative. If they want to enjoy peace, well then, iniquum esse. It was iniquus aum, the opposite of aequus aum. Aequus is equal or fair. Iniquus is unfair. It is currently unfair. De stipendio, de takes the ablative stipendio. This is the tribute again. Recusare. It was unfair to recusare, refuse the tribute. Refusing the tribute is unfair. Concerning the tributes, refusing it is unfair. Quod, a tribute which, quod, sua voluntate, of their own accord they, ad id tempus, up till id tempus, up to the accusative, up till this point, pependerent, they had paid out. And this is a third person plural, perfect active subjunctive, because we're in a subordinate clause. A tribute, quod, the antecedent is stipendio, tribute which they had paid out, because we're in a past tense, we're in a prior action, up till this point, sua voluntate, of their own accord. So if they wish to try again, meaning to fight him, he is prepared again to fight it out. If they wish to enjoy peace, it is unfair to refuse the tribute, which up to this point they had paid of their own accord, of their own volition. Amicitiam populi Romani sibi ornamento et praesidio non detrimento esse apportere, atque se hac spe petisse. Amicitiam, from amicitia, I, feminine. I'm not a cat. And it's accusative singular feminine. It is going to be the object of apportere. Populi Romani, so genitive, singular, friendship of the Roman people. Sibi, going to be the dative, referring to aurea vistus. Ornamento e praesidio. These are datives. In ornamentation, a decoration, and a praesidio from praesidium e neuter is a garrison. But here it's going to mean a safeguard. Non detrimento esse apportere. So when you have a portet here, a portet, a portere, a portuit, impersonal verb, the subject is always an it. So it is necessary that an accusative, like the friendship of the Roman people, be esse, to be. Why is a portere infinitive again? Oh yeah, we're an indirect statement. It is necessary, that's going to be our main verb, so an infinitive. It is necessary right now that the friendship of the Roman people be for the purpose of, double dative of purpose, ornamento et praesidio, be an ornamentation, a decoration, a shiny thing, and a safeguard, sibi, for him, the dative of reference. So remember that a double dative, is composed of dative of purpose, here ornamento and praesidio, also detrimento, and then a dative of reference. So a dative of purpose for the purpose of being, here's the form of to be that goes with it, for the purpose of being this thing. So the friendship of the Roman people ought to exist as a decoration and a safeguard for him, not as a detrimento, as a detriment. Shouldn't hold him back. It should be a thing that helps me. I should be allowed to enslave whoever I want. I should be allowed to invade whatever lands I want and kill whoever I want and take whatever I want. You guys should not be allowed to tell me what to do. This is terrible. This is a travesty. This is a sham. This is a mockery. It's a Travis sham mockery. Atque, and also, I'm not done yet, say, aurea vistus, he, the accusative subject of the indirect statement, hoc, hic, haec, hoc, it's ablative singular feminine to go with the ablative singular feminine of spe, spe, feminine, with this hope, by this hope, petisse, the syncopated form of petivisse, the perfect active infinitive of peto, petere, petivi, or peti in this case, petitus, to petition for, to seek out, to go for, to ask for, to aim at. It's a quick motion forward. He, perfect infinitive, had, before he was boasting to Caesar all this stuff, he had sought out the friendship of the Roman people with this hope. And he had sought it out with this hope that it would exist as a decoration, a shiny thing he could pin on his collar and show people at parties, and a safeguard, another shiny thing he could show people at other kinds of parties and say, you better do what I say, or it ought to be that way for him. Not as a detriment. He better not have Romans showing up at his territory and saying, sorry, can't be having these slaves around here. And what, people are paying you tribute? The people you conquered in war are paying you tribute? I'm sorry, aurea vistus, we can't have that happening here. Who are the Romans to tell me to do this stuff? Aurea vistus whines. Si per populum Romanum stipendium remittator et deditici subtrahantur, non minus libenter sese recusatorum populi Romaniam citiam quam ad petieret. If per takes the accusative, through the Roman people, the stipendium, the tribute, the stipend, remittator, third person singular, present, passive, subjunctive of remitto, remittere, remissi, remissus. Remember, it's a third conjugation, so the stem is remit with the double T, and then you add the A, and then the tor, it's passive. If the tribute is, in the future, to be given back, to be handed back, to be sent back, through the Roman people, through the agency of the Roman people, by means of the Roman people, they had a hand in it. that this tribute is being sent back, and that the Deditikios is a surrendered person, and that the people who surrendered, good Lord, did I mention they surrendered? Subtrahantor, they wouldn't just be trahantor, dragged away from him, but the sub part adds a sense of sort of underhandedness, like a suspiciously, like they would be through suspicious means taken from him, through duplicity taken from him. Oh my goodness, if they were taken from him, if the surrendered were to be taken duplicitously, oh good Lord, non minus liberter, no less, minus, no less liberter. Libenter is an adverb form, like enthusiastically. Se, referring to Ariovistus, and it's emphatic. Recusatorum, and we're missing the esse. This is the future active infinitive. Shows a subsequent action. He would, if this is to be so. I mean, we have yet to see if the tribute is to be sent back. It's not a done deal. It's not the future indicative. We're talking about the present subjunctive here. Present subjunctive. It's not a done deal yet. But what will be a done deal, future indicative, so the future infinitive here, this is not a present subjunctive, is that he, recusatorum, he will refuse. He will refuse the amicitiam, accusa direct object, of the Roman people, no less enthusiastically than he had ad petieret, than he had sought it. Ad petto, ad petere, appetivi, appetitus. So it's ad and petto. He had gone after it. It's not just petto, petise, but ad petto. He had gone for it, like really for it. And it's a syncopated form, like petise is. So petiverit, third person singular, perfect active subjunctive. Because he's casting this as a future thing. Then he had already, perfect subjunctive, prior action, done this thing. Then he had already sought it. If through the agency of the Roman people, the stipend is to be handed back and the surrender to be taken through duplicitous means, no less enthusiastically would he refuse the friendship of the Roman people than when he had sought it. Quod, what of the quod multitudinem Germanorum in Galliam traducat, id se sui muniendi non Galliae oppugnandae causa facere. Of the charge that multitudinem Germanorum in Galliam traducat, of the charge, of the fact that traducat, that he is currently, and it's noticed that it's seen as a subordinate clause because it takes the subjunctive, that he is third person singular present active subjunctive of traduco, traducere, leading a multitudinem, accusa direct object, multitudo, multitudinem, a multitude of Germans, Germanorum, in plus the accusative direct object into Gaul. Id, this thing, and id is answering to quote. This thing, what thing? Though the thing which he is accused of doing, that he's leading a multitude, a huge multitude of Germans. There's a multitude out there of Germans into Gaul. Well, this thing, this charge, say he himself, accusative subject of the indirect statement, he facere is currently doing, facio facere feci factus, for the sake of causa. Now causa, or gratia, plus the genitive, gerund or gerundive. Here we have the gerundive because it's agreeing with sui. Notice the se and the sui right next to each other. Oh, that's very nice. Muniendi is genitive as well as sui. Muniendi must agree with sui in gender numbering case. It's like se oppugnandum. In order to attack him for the sake of defending sui himself is the object of muniendi. He was doing this thing for the sake of defending himself. In order to defend himself, non Galliae oppugnandae, not for the sake of another gerundive, Galliae oppugnandae, not for the sake of attacking Gaul. I have these armed people around me for defense, not to hurt anyone. I'm covered in weapons because I have to defend myself, not because I'm looking for trouble. Of course. Of the charge that he is leading a multitude, a whole host, a large number of Germans into Gaul. Well, he is doing this thing, no questions about it, for the sake of defending himself, fortifying himself, not for the sake of attacking Gaul. That would be ridiculous. So Galliae oppugnandi, genitive singular, gerundive with causa. Eos re testimonium esse, quod nisi rogatus non veneret, et quod bellum non intuleret, sed defenderet. Eos re. So is ea id, it's going to be ea to go with res re feminine, of this thing. And remember, res re, stuff. Use context to figure out what we're talking about. Testimonium is going to be the accusative subject here, the indirect statement, and esse is est. This is testimony, evidence of this thing. The evidence of this thing is that, and then he's going to give the evidence, the testimonium of this fact, that he's using this multitude of Germans as defense, not in order to make an assault upon the Gauls. So, of this fact, we could translate re here as fact. Of this fact, here's the evidence. And that evidence is, quote, nisi rogatus non veneret. Beautiful. Nisi is ne si, so not if. It's the negation. You could also say si ... known and put the known in front of the operative word in the protasis, but usually negative protases are introduced by nisi. Quod nisi rogatus. Look, once again, argument becomes full circle. Rogatus, or at least on this slide, because remember, this is only the end of part 1. So, unless, if not asked, non veneret, he would, because he had not come to Gaul, perfect in third person singular, perfect active subjunctive, because we're in a subordinate clause. This is the testimony. The testimony is that he had not come to Gaul unless he had been asked. Checkmate. Obviously, I'm here because I was invited. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. Checkmate. And because bellum non intuleret, and because he, third person singular, perfect active subjunctive, he had not inflicted, declared war. Yeah, obviously, he didn't declare war. I didn't declare war. Not my fault. I didn't start it. Said defenderet, but he defended against it. Third person singular, perfect active subjunctive of defendo, defendere, defendi, defensus. But he defended against it. This was the evidence of this fact, that he was bringing a lot of Germans into Gaul, not for the sake of attacking Gaul, but for his own defense. And this is the evidence that he had not come unless he had been asked, and he had not inflicted war, he had not declared war, but he had defended against it. Checkmate. All right, that's a lot of oratio obliqua, and boom, there's some oratio recta. So remember, what is in oratio obliqua right here? What are infinitives acting as main verbs here with an accusative subject of the indirect statement? Those accusative subjects of the indirect statement in oratio obliqua become nominatives, and these infinitives become finite verbs. And remember, they will get their tenses based on how they act in their own sentences, whereas the oratio obliqua is beholden to, the whole thing is beholden to praedicavit. Whereas in this, we have inquit, the main verb, which introduces this. So we have quotation marks here because it's a direct quotation. Inquit. Quoth he, saith he. I, first person singular, I, Ariovistus, said this himself. Quotation marks. I, perfect tense, have crossed the Rhine. Not of my own accord, whereas before it was he had crossed the Rhine, not of his own accord. This is what he boasted. He boasted that he had crossed the Rhine, not of his own accord. In this, quoth he, quotation marks, I crossed the Rhine, not of my own accord, but asked and invited, now nominative to agree with implied ego, a Gallis, invited by the Gauls, not without great hope and great prizes, great hope of prizes, the great hope of great prizes. Did I, reliqui, did I, perfect tense, leave my home and my relations, my relatives. Sedes habeo, I have settlements in Gaul. Yielded, having been yielded already by the Gauls, they themselves, by the very people. I have hostages, habeo, I have hostages, given over by the free will of they themselves, by their own free will. I am Capio, currently taking a tribute by the law of war, which the victors are accustomed to impose upon the conquered. Which the winners are accustomed to impose upon the losers. The conquered are accustomed to impose. The conquerors are accustomed to impose upon the conquered. Non ego Galli, sed Galli mihi bellum intulerunt. I did not inflict war upon the Gauls, but the Gauls have inflicted war upon me. All the states of Gaul, they have come for the sake of attacking me, and they held camp against me. All of their forces have been, or they were, routed and overcome by me in a single battle. If again they currently, present tense, are wishing to try it out, to test it, again, I am currently, paratus, prepared to fight it out to a conclusion. If they currently wish to employ to make use of peace, well then it is currently unfair and equal to refuse concerning the tribute which they themselves have paid out up till this point here by their own free will. Amicitium populi Romani mihi ornamento et praesidio non detrimenti esse apportet. Make sure you add the hoc here. So, amicitium, the friendship of the Roman people. Mihi ornamenti, these double datives. Non detrimento esse apportet is impersonal. It is necessary for the friendship of the Roman people to act as a decoration and a safeguard for me, not as a detriment for me, you want to add. And I, ego, hoc spe petivi, and I sought it with this hope. If through the Roman people the tribute shall be remittetur, shall be handed back, shall be sent over, sent back, and the surrendered are withdrawn by duplicitous means, or will be withdrawn. Non minus libenter recusabo, no less enthusiastically will I refuse the friendship of the Roman people than ad petii, than I have sought it. Quod multitudinem Germanorum in Gallium traduco, as to the charge that I am leading a multitude of Germans, a whole host of Germans into Gaul. Well, this thing that I am doing facio mei muniendi, for the causa, for the sake of mei muniendi, fortifying myself, not for the sake of attacking Gallii, for attacking Gaul. The testimony is of this fact, the evidence of this fact is this, that I have not come to Gaul unless I was asked, unless having been asked. Remember, the perfect passive participle happens before, prior to the main verb. And I did not declare war, but I have defended against it. And remember, this is just part 1. The German king's arguments and haughty boasting continue in part 2.